today I want to share the top 2 reasons I left the Protestant church and returned to the Catholic Church. So let's dive in. So reason number 1, church history and the early church fathers. So coming from a Protestant church, I was taught that the Catholic Church coming from a Protestant church, I was taught that Catholics aren't really Christians. They added books to the Bible. They don't even read the Bible. They worship Mary and the saints. And of course, the biggest issue being the authority of the Pope. So these claims about the Catholic Church, I've come to find out, are absolutely false. They are not true at all, and there's actually an answer, and a beautiful one at that, for these false claims Protestants bring up. So the Protestant church I went to, which I have nothing against, like I said in my previous videos, I loved it. I love my brothers and sisters in Christ that are Protestant, but they taught an apologetics class to teach us to defend our faith against other false religions like Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Islam, and so on. But the surprising thing is, they had Catholicism in there too. So they taught people to defend their faith against Catholics. And it's like, why? Why are we trying to defend our faith against others that believe in the same faith? But anyway, what they taught was different from what I've found from my own research. So I started looking into church history and the early church fathers, and I was really surprised to have found that the things Protestants taught were just either out of ignorance maybe, or misunderstanding. You know, the whole Reformation happened in the 1500s when Luther separated from the Catholic Church. The fact that Christians held to Catholic teachings and beliefs for over 1,000 years was so interesting to me. All of a sudden, when Luther came in to challenge some of the church's teachings that he didn't agree with, and then caused the Protestant Reformation, and then all these other denominations, 45,000 plus, that occurred after. You know, as you can see, it wasn't adding up. You know, on all these different denominations have just now watered down the sacraments. All these different denominations that occurred from this one event, even though the Catholic Church was the only church for over 1,000 years, and all Christians followed it. So even looking back at the early church fathers, like Saint Ignatius, for example, he quoted, "Wherever the bishop shall appear, there let the multitude of the people also be, even as wherever Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church." That was in 107 AD, I believe. So if you look into the history of the early church fathers, they were Catholic. They believed in the Catholic Church, especially in the Eucharist and all the sacraments. So just looking back at the history, the evidence, I found that much of what I was told about Catholicism was false until I researched it myself. So reason number 2, why I returned to the Catholic Church: the Eucharist. So Protestants teach that the Eucharist is nothing but a symbol. And you know what? They're partially right. It is a symbol, and it is Jesus Christ himself. It is both. But they water the sacraments of God's gift down. They would have communion together at the church I went to once a month, which consisted of a cracker and a little bit of apple juice. So this is not Holy Communion. This is not what the Catholic Church teaches. Now, in all honesty, coming from a Protestant background, I can understand their point of view, when it comes to John 6, when Jesus speaks about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. I can see why they see it as a symbol, as Jesus talked a lot in parables. However, once again, after looking into it myself, I finally came to understand the teachings on this from the Catholic Church, especially going back to history and the early church fathers once again. I actually started desiring the Eucharist more and more. The fact that it is the real presence of Christ, his very body, blood, soul, and divinity given to us in a supernatural way, where the bread and wine remain the same, but the substance is supernaturally changed, is what the church calls transubstantiation. That can be a hard word to say, but when you truly get to understand the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, you just see the power of God's grace in them. So just going a little more into baptism, another sacrament, for example. It's not just an outward symbol of your faith. It is God's grace actually doing something. It is forgiving all sins prior to baptism, making you a new creation in Christ, and bringing you into full membership in the church as a child of God. So it is both and, as the Catholic Church teaches. So those are two huge things I just couldn't ignore: church history and the early church fathers, and the Eucharist. So if you're someone who's searching, questioning, or even skeptical, I would encourage you, don't be afraid to go deeper. Research, pray, and ask the hard questions. Don't just take whatever someone says as fact, because truth can handle it. So let's keep walking toward truth together.